Thank you very much, Cyril. Masterful as always. I'll share my screen. I have my name is Bill McGlynn. I'm with the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs, working on the synthetics coalition team. And I'm pleased to open the meetings today, which will be the coalition groups, sub-working groups under Coalition Group 1 and Coalition Group 2. And I'm sorry, I just want to make sure you can see my screen.
We can see your desk. We can see your desktop, but not your screen.
I see. I'm sorry about that. Let me see what's going on there. That's weird. Okay, here we go.
And now we can see your screen. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'll make a few administrative announcements. Those of you who have been working hard in the working group will be very familiar with most of these. We've spent considerable time on the private sector engagement plan. There is a fair amount of information on that in the on the website, www.globalcoalition.us. I wanted to highlight that we'll be focusing on these 6 industries that have been a focus for the private sector and the synthetics issue. And we also have identified 2 new ones, or ones that we think need some more emphasis, pharmaceutical industry and artificial intelligence. This is a short description of the plan, which, as I say, is on the website. Essentially, we've launched it with some focus on social media in the US. We had a meeting on February 9th with the participation of 3 of the social media companies. And very pleased that the International Narcotics Control Board will be hosting a Tech Against Trafficking meeting March 5 through 8th in Vienna. And there's more description of the next steps. I won't go in great detail, except I just wanted to share that. And you know, there's a fairly detailed approach to how we proceed in this important area. Turning a little bit to the work of the sub-working group. This is the last meeting of a phase of the coalition where we've been sharing best practices and models. That's been extremely helpful, and we're looking forward to today's presentations. Among the reactions we've received is countries and others who would like to share best practices and make additional presentations. We think that might be useful in the next series of meetings occurring over the next few months. We've also shared a draft list of recommendations. These have been shared with co-chairs, and there will be a meeting with co-chairs on March 6th and 7th. We're encouraging the co-chairs to share these recommendations within governments. And these points more or less describe that we don't expect the recommendations to solve or answer every single problem, and we think it's a start. We're looking forward to more input and reaction by members of the working groups and how the co-chairs and sub-working co-chairs see the issues. Just to share one example here, and this comes out of working group 2, which had a very interesting discussion last week, and we may hear more about that later today. This is what a recommendation looks like, at least as we're trying to form them. One might be adopt new innovative drug data collection techniques. 2 specific initiatives that have been discussed have been the Web App Assist screening tool and wastewater analysis. The achievement section gives a potential set of achievements, and oh, sorry, I seem to have bounced this out of our, and finally, there's some outcomes that we might identify from those actions. And with that, let me turn the meeting over to our distinguished co-chairs, Andrew Cunningham and Hanny Root. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Bill. for these opening remarks. I think it's clear that you're progressing with the next stages, or thinking about the next stages of the global coalition. So we're all very happy that there's some activity there. Good afternoon, good evening to everyone who's tuning in. As Bill said, this is the last meeting of the first phase of this sub-working group 1.1, which is, as we know, about the manufacture of synthetic drugs and the precursors. My name is Andrew Cunningham. I work at the European Monitoring Centre for Drugs and Drug Addiction in the European Union, which is based in Lisbon. And I'll be co-chairing this session with Henning Root from the Police Service of South Africa. It was mentioned already in the opening remarks of Bill that private sector engagement is becoming quite important, and clearly in the field of synthetic drugs production, manufacturing, trafficking, private sector engagement is a key to that. But before getting to private sector engagement, which is on the agenda for our meeting today, I'm going to pass over the floor to Henning to introduce our first speaker. Henning, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you very much, Bill, for the opening remarks. Welcome to everyone for the last for this phase, our last meeting. I'm Henning Root. I'm from South Africa. I'm from the Directorate of Priority Crime Investigation, and I'm responsible for the chemical monitoring in South Africa. Without further ado, I want to pass the floor to Barbara Remberg of the INCB. She's from the Precursor Control Section. And Barbara will give us a presentation on PEN Online and PICS. So without further ado, over to you, Barbara. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will share my screen. Just a second. Could you confirm that you can see
Barbara? And Barbara, yes, we can see your PowerPoint presentation. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much, Henning and colleagues. Good morning, good afternoon, or maybe even good evening. It's lovely to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about the INCB online platforms to support global cooperation to prevent illicit drug manufacture. They are part of a much broader approach to address this problem that also INCB is engaged with. And all of that is sort of enshrined or based on the 1988 convention, obviously Article 12 on precursor chemicals, internationally controlled chemicals, and then Article 13 for the equipment, and also for non-scheduled chemicals. And all of that also extends, and I think Andrew mentioned it, also to industry cooperation and certain forms of, I think we have the internet industry also, which is for precursors. We're talking about surface internet, and also sensitizing criminal justice practitioners. All of that forms the broader approach to which I'm now only talking about the operational aspects related to two sides of the coin. And that is where INCB is providing platforms for monitoring international legitimate trade in chemicals on the one hand. So this is the licit side of things. And then if a diversion or after diversion happened, a seizure is made. So it's the trafficking side. This is the other platform that we offer. This is the precursor communication, a precursor incident communication system, PICS. And all of that is part of one continuum, and they are all interconnected. And this is what I was trying to illustrate on this slide. And while the illicit trade monitoring based on the international convention is focusing on the chemicals, the PICS system is also available to exchange intelligence and operational, actionable information on equipment as well. And in both cases, INCB's role is also to support investigations, sort of on the illicit trade side into suspicious shipments, stopped shipments, and objected shipments. So we would not simply want to say somebody objected to a shipment, the shipment isn't sent, and that is the end of the story. But it's rather to understand who placed the order, who was behind, because it's very likely that sort of an unsuccessful attempt is followed by an approach somewhere else, either in the same country or in another country. And because all of that is international, global now, so this is why it's important to have these global systems. Once, as I said, when we are looking at the trafficking side, the PICS allows to enter on a voluntary basis and communicate seizures of precursors and precursors under international control, and also non-scheduled chemicals not under international control, seizures in trafficking cases, in clandestine labs, but also thefts or even dump sites more recently. So an INCB support is in both sides, and it is really interconnected because we're also talking about companies that are maybe involved in both sides. Now, moving first to the illicit trade monitoring, the PEN online system, I think many of you are very familiar with. It's an online platform for real-time exchange of planned exports, so pre-export notifications. And the target audience for this system is competent national authorities. So they are the ones in charge of precursor control in the country. And the officials from, it can be more than one competent authority, but those are the users of the PEN online system. And importantly, it is that this system is free of charge. So it operationalizes in a way the Article 12 of the 1988 convention, that part that says that governments should cooperate to inform each other of suspicious transactions in international trade. Currently, the system has 169 registered countries and territories. So you see it's quite universally used at this point. And how does it work? So again, many of you are familiar with that, I'm sure. The PEN online system is limited to the substances that are under international control. So currently we are talking about 33 chemicals. And when an operator in an exporting country plans an export, he or she is a registered operator, obviously under the precursor control regime of that country, and informs the competent authority, who then shares the information about this planned export with the authority of the importing country. And because it's a pre-export and information about a planned export, there is time to verify the legitimacy of the importer, of the end user in the importing country. And so doing that, INCB sees all of these transactions. Obviously, that is confidential, that trade. That's why I can also not share any of this information here. But it is also important to recognize that this is not, it's not a database. It's really a communication platform between two countries. And what INCB sees is somehow to support, to identify unusual patterns and follow up if necessary with either the exporter or the importer as well. And again, you see here that what we are monitoring through that system per year is around 30 to 35,000 pens that are communicated. On the side of the chemicals that are not under international control, we have launched a system that we called PEN Online Lite, simply because it's a voluntary system and it focuses on planned exports of chemicals that are not included in Table 1 and Table 2. But it is based on the technology and has the same features and technology, or most of the features. That's why it's a light system. It's less complex. And it has all registered PEN Online users that from the PEN Online system that have automatically access to the PEN Online Lite system. And because we do recognize that some of these chemicals may be controlled by other ministries or other agencies in the countries, there is a possibility also to register additional users that are not competent authorities for precursor control, and that some countries have done already. So currently we have 31 countries actively using, and actively using, I mean, it's either exporting countries or actively sort of communicating through that system their agreement or objection to planned shipments of these chemicals. And so far there are more than 900 of these pens that were sent through the light system. Just some data. The most traded chemicals are very common chemicals, but you also see GBL as number 4, and methylamine, which is a quite important chemical for many cathinones, but also methamphetamine, ketamine, and so on. So it's a quite universal chemical that is communicated through the system. By number, GBL is by far the most pens that have been sent, and through that system so far to date, there were 350 tons of GBL that were prevented or stopped sort of from being shipped to a country that wasn't aware that there was any orders of these chemicals, this chemical. So I think that's in a short time quite successful, but there's certainly room for improvement, and that is what we are in the coming weeks and months are really promoting to use that more often, because any prevented diversion is better than sort of making a seizure and following up afterwards. Now, the other side of the coin is the Precursors incident communication system for trafficking incidents and for sharing of actionable intelligence. Here the keywords are highlighted. Again, it's a secure online tool. It's for real-time communication. It's a global tool, and it is for precursors. And here, I mean, again, controlled, internationally controlled, but also non-scheduled chemicals, not under international control, as well as equipment. And here again, we encourage an as wide as possible range of regulatory and law enforcement authorities to register and to use the system. Again, it's not a database, it's a communication platform that with the aim to trigger investigations. And because for that, and I will show you in a minute, you will see also contact information of the information owner, if you like, or information provider for easy communication. The system, as I said, also is also used for equipment incidents, or can be used for equipment incident. It's an active system because sort of for each new incident or updated incident, an email is sent to the registered users with the summary information. And so you don't need to log in if that is not of any interest. And you can also sort of deselect or unselect certain regions that you may not be interested in, or certain substances that you may not be interested in. And the system is available in English, French, Russian, and Spanish. So it's a multilingual system. A few snapshots here for the last year, 2023. So we had 402 incidents with more than 1,200 substance communications. So that means there was on average 3 substances communicated per incident. There were 21 countries that have communicated these incidents, and you see them on the map. So it's quite global, I mean, from all parts of the world. You see quite significant amounts here that, and again, remember that this is a precursor chemical. So converting that into end products, I think, for example, for 2023, we had certain non-scheduled amphetamine type stimulant precursors that would have prevented nearly 50 tons of amphetamine end product that were communicated through that system. And that is something you see here also at the bottom left, that the majority of substances that we see, ISSL here is the International Special Surveillance List, which is substances that are not under international control but have been encountered in illicit manufacture. And then other non-scheduled substances, they account for the majority of incidents. So table 1 and table 2 substances, controlled, internationally controlled precursors, are far less in number. And one thing we always want to highlight is really one of our best user is the Netherlands. So they share a lot of information and to some extent a reflection of the realities on the ground, but it is also that they do really make that effort and to share the information and cooperate through the system. Now I mentioned these 21 countries, and the map that that's here at the left side is the same map that you saw on the previous slide. This is the country that has communicated the incident. But when you look at supply chains, origin, transit, destination, and so on, you see that there are many more countries. So this is one of the advantages or the potential of the system, that you may find that your country is one way or another implicated in an incident that you may not be aware of because it's not happening in your country. And so the idea here is then to get back to the information provider and help launch and investigate and share the operational relevant information. In terms of substances, you see very common acids, bases, and solvents here at the top, topping the list. But then very soon you have these glycidic acid derivatives, which are chemicals for both ecstasy and methamphetamine that are actually up for a vote for international control next month. So this has been, again, in 2023, quite a significant development. And then here is another one, and also here the methylamine that I mentioned earlier. So in that sense, this PICS system also serves as an early warning mechanism on precursor chemicals. Here, very briefly, again, I mentioned non-scheduled chemicals. We recently did look quickly at NPS precursors. And so you see that also those are communicated through the system, predominantly in Europe, but also in certain other parts of the world. On equipment, I mentioned this is quite still, I would say, in its infancy, but there is also a significant focus on that for us to sort of make sure that this information is increasingly shared through the system. Last year, there have been 11 equipment incidents. You see where how they were distributed. And also we have a drop-down menu for the most frequently seen pieces of equipment, if you like. But that can be incrementally increased as we see more information. And we also have certain, here we talk about sourcing to understand whether it is commercially produced new equipment or whether it's secondhand equipment or whether it's even custom-made equipment. So there's all sorts of additional information available through that system. The system PICS allows this incident search. So you have a dynamic and Google type search here that would search all fields, but then you also have dynamic filtering here. And again, you see I've just entered for this ecstasy ethyl glycidic derivative here, and we had 72 incidents in 2023. And again, that has informed also the scheduling recommendations of INCB that are up for vote for the CND next month. And finally, I think I have one slide that I wanted to show for Henning also, because I think it's quite commendable that he has recently communicated through PICS an incident, and I assume that he would talk about that separately. And what is commendable here is really that when we say it's a real-time system, I mean, the incident occurred on the 12th and it was communicated on the 15th. And it was quite a significant operation here with a number of chemicals. So the list here is far longer than what you would see. And so again, through sharing of images, but also sharing of airway bills and whatever shipping documents are available, this tool sort of provides that, and at a user level can decide who can see what. So it's also, if certain things are confidential, to only the concerned countries that can be limited and restricted through the system. And now my last slide, I just wanted to come back to what I said at the beginning. Obviously, all of these two systems are the operational tools, if you like, online communication platforms in this broader approach to support global cooperation. And this broader approach consists, even at the operational level, obviously the industry, knowledge of industries, and also the landscape of industries in countries, especially now that we are talking about substances that are not under international control. So the range of industries is broadened, and Bill has spoken about chemical and pharmaceutical industries. And I would really say that there is far more. Even the chemical industry obviously is just a quite generic term. There are many subdivisions which all would need to be looked at. And this is where we are sort of supporting also mapping of industries in a number of countries. The internet investigations I mentioned, criminal justice practitioners. But so what I've said today is the important communication tools as part of this broader approach to addressing illicit drug manufacture at the global level. Thank you very much. And I'm available for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara, for that very thorough, very insightful presentation on PICS and PEN. I work with those on a daily basis. We had communication in this week, and I must say for a fact that is if tools, if it's implemented the correct way, it will definitely serve as an early warning. I can just mention PEN Online. Also very recently, as last week, we received the PEN Online with a pre-export notification of a transaction of norepinephrine, which we, as South Africa, we have not received any application documents per se. So we are busy following that up. And at this stage, it appears as if it might have been an illicit transaction. But like I said, that is still under investigation. So it's definitely a tool that works. And we wouldn't have known of this intended export of norepinephrine to our country if it wasn't for the system. So thank you very much for that. And like I said, it's definitely a system that works. Andrew, I'm going to pass over to you now just to introduce our second speaker. At the later stage, we'll elaborate on what Barbara touched on regarding that method. Over to you, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Henning, and thank you, Barbara, for a really, really clear explanation of these tools that are available at the global level. We're here talking about a global coalition, so I think it's incumbent on all of us to be well aware of the tools that are available for all of the countries, and it's really fundamental knowledge of the good instruments that can be used to share information on drug precursors and those other substances that we've been talking about for chemicals that are not controlled in the international conventions. Okay, so we talked a little in the beginning about public-private sector engagement, and so I'd like to introduce the next speaker, who again will be talking about some of the tools that have been developed at global level for intervening in relation to public-private partnerships. And so I'd like to introduce Perkha Ahmed. She's a specialist working at the UNODC's synthetic drug strategy, and she's going to be talking about the UN Toolkit on synthetic drugs. Perkha, are you with us?
Yes, I'm right here. Thank you so much, Andy. Yes, so as Andy mentioned, I'll be talking about the UN Toolkit on
and Perkha, my
synthetic
apologies.
drugs.
You need to be on
Sure.
the English channel, please. If you can please click the icon of the globe on your screen and switch to the English channel and continue. Thank you.
Okay, is that
Please go
fine
ahead.
now? Okay,
Please go
great.
ahead.
Great. So as I was saying, the toolkit is basically a byproduct of the UNODC synthetic drug strategy. And the strategy, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, was essentially launched in 2021 by UNODC to provide a framework for the international community to take action on the synthetic drug problem. And the toolkit was created because there was this realization of, well, what tools are available to support the implementation of the strategy? And the answer was, well, many tools are available across the UN system, but that was the problem, is that they're across the entire UN system. And so the toolkit was born because the idea was to consolidate all these tools that are available and present them on one website. And the toolkit currently has over 400 resources from different UN agencies, from WHO to our colleagues at INCB to other colleagues in UNODC, and we present them in what we call thematic areas called modules. We currently have 12 different modules, and we're constantly adding new ones. And as Andy mentioned, we will be launching this week the PPP module, and accessibility is a big part of the toolkit, and that's why the toolkit is free to access, and the resources available are entirely open source. I think there's a few exceptions here and there where there's an extra layer of permission required. And the toolkit is available in all 6 official UN languages. And as of the end of 2023, the toolkit was accessed by over 124,000 users from 203 countries and territories. So without further ado, I will now take you to the toolkit and share my screen here. And I think you should all be able to see it. The best way to access the UN Toolkit is through the Synthetic Drug Strategy website, which is syntheticdrugs.unodc.org. That brings you here to this landing page where you'll find information about the synthetic drug strategy itself, as well as the UN Toolkit. Here you see the UN Toolkit available in all 6 languages. And I think for today, we will go to the English language page. And when you land at the toolkit, you'll see that the toolkit actually offers more than just resources. We have the different languages up here, but you can also see that we offer opportunities to engage with experts. We have an Ask an Expert page where you can submit questions here. And if you have something specific, what we usually do is, because we work so closely with experts to develop the different modules, we have expert contacts that are related to each thematic area. So if you have a specific question about precursors, for example, we can take that question and send it to our contact at INCB, who can provide some kind of answer and also point you to the relevant tools. We also have something what we call Ask the Expert Lives, and these are live sessions where users can ask questions and also submit questions, which the experts can answer directly. We've done one for almost every module, and we'll be hosting one on PPPs and in the coming months. Then we also have our latest feature, which is the community page. And I highly encourage everyone to sign up for this page, because this page is really sort of taking the toolkit to the next level beyond the resources. It encourages sort of direct engagement of toolkit users with each other so that people can share their expertise, their experiences, and their insights. Up here, you'll also see that we have a library, and this has all the various resources that I'll be discussing today, divided by the modules. You can access each of the resources by the different modules. So here you see precursors, and you'll access the complete list here, as well as the languages that they're available in. Then coming back to the toolkit itself, you see these are the 12 modules that I referenced. Given that today we're talking about precursors, I thought I would quickly talk through the precursors and forensics before going into PPPs directly. So this is the precursor module, and all of the modules have a similar layout, I would say. You have a bit of an overview here, and then you have the resources divided into subsections that are framed in questions. So here you have information about international precursor control systems. You'll see here the PICS and PEN that were referenced, as well as an overview of the precursor system. Takes you to the INCB page. Then we also have procedures for placing substances under international control. Here we have precursors that are under international control, which are not scheduled. And you have guides here from UNODC and INCB about the red list. Then you have chemicals not under international control, also from INCB reports, as well as UNODC's manuals on clandestine manufacture and precursor chemical monographs. Then going into illicit trade monitoring, you have what we discussed, which Barbara explained to us earlier, was the PEN Online system. You have access to also the information about PEN Online Lite. And as I mentioned, we developed these modules with INCB, with the experts, and all of these links take you to those external pages. So here we come to INCB's document. Here we have another INCB tool and resources on implementing Article 12 of the 88 Convention. And lastly, we also have a section on illicit trade monitoring and, on the trends in precursor trafficking. And here you access the information on global trends. Again, you can see all of these pages in different languages when you click on up here. And usually if the resource is available in that language, you'll be able to find it here. The other module that I would like to show today is the forensics module. Here we have the various resources on drug identification, safe handling. This module in particular, we developed with the UN laboratory here with UNODC. You have information on the drug and precursor field test kits. Also information about sampling and lab analysis and identification. Here you can access all the various manuals and guidelines UNODC has developed, and they're divided into the different substance type. Coming back to the landing page, we have also resources on safe handling and disposal. You have the guidelines here from UNODC, as well as an e-learning platform from UNODC. This is one of the few where you need to require extra access for, and you just contact through the registration page. And it's right here, number 27, and it's a series of videos on the topic. Coming back to the page, we have also information about personal protective equipment and clandestine manufacture of substances under control. There's also a section on quality assurance, and this delves into the UNODC ICE collaborative exercise program. You have information that you can access directly through these links, and it will take you to the ICE program and information on how to participate, as well as the portal that's associated with it. And then last but not least, I will take you to our newest module on public-private partnerships. As you see, similar format. So you have the overview of the module itself here, and then the subsections to the right here. This obviously is a really massive topic and one with lots of different subtopics to explore. And so the way we decided to divide the module was to divide it into fundamentals, then the development of PPPs, and then finally the implementation where you look at specific sectors. Looking at the fundamentals, we relied a lot on resources from the World Bank Group, which provided sort of very foundational definitions of what a PPP is. We also have information from IMF, OECD. We also have a page on benefits and limitations of PPPs. Again, the World Bank Group provided lots of these resources. We also have the resource from the Path Forward from UNODC, which talks about PPPs in the context of drugs. Then we outline some of the benefits and limitations that PPPs provide in this sector. And they're outlined here based on the reference materials provided. Then we also look at some of the legal mandates that support PPPs and addressing synthetic drugs, and we outline the several quotes and sections of these various documents here for additional information. We also have a separate module on legal, which delves into the specifics about legislative approaches. And that's the case with a lot of the toolkit, is a lot of these modules and topics are very interconnected. And so we will often cross-reference different modules in the toolkit. In the second subsection, we focus on development. So that's about identifying and screening opportunities for PPPs. Here, again, we have resources from the World Bank Group that go into the specifics of the identification and screening process, as well as how to conduct it. There's tools available on project screening and analytics. In the case of the World Bank, a lot of these tools obviously do focus on infrastructure, but we found that the fundamentals of it were all the same. And so they fit perfectly in terms of the context of addressing synthetic drugs. Similarly, we have on establishing PPP frameworks, reasons for a PPP framework, a document on identifying the key components of a PPP framework, and then about instituting a PPP framework itself. There's also a few tools available that can help you benchmark your framework and look at whether it's sustainable and how effective it is. And these tools are available here on the bottom. Then the last section goes into implementation. This is where we get a bit more sector specific. And one point that I should make here is it was hard to limit it to these 4 subgroups because in the end, every section, every module of the toolkit could address an angle of public-private partnerships, but we specifically focused on these 4. And one was the topic of diversion of synthetic drugs. And here, obviously, we highlight some of the tools provided by INCB, as well as UNODC, which has the program, The Path Forward, which put together a document that's based on several meetings that were held of experts to discuss roadmaps on how to develop and sustain effective PPPs on the topic of diversion. And then obviously we reference some other modules here, one on precursors and one on access and diversion. The other implementation section, which might be relevant to this group, is addressing safe handling and disposal of synthetic drugs and their precursors. And here again, we offer concepts of PPPs that could potentially address synthetic drugs. So we have guidelines and best practices and PPP collaboration to develop comprehensive guidelines, PPPs to implement training programs, take back initiatives, infrastructure and technology to support the safe handling and disposal, and then environmental risk, so PPPs to conduct environmental risk assessments. Here we offer a resource from the Public-Private Partnership Legal Resource Center on solid waste services, and these sort of provide models that can be relevant to the disposal of synthetic drugs and their precursors. And lastly, we have the relevant modules, again, the forensics one highlighted on the bottom here. To wrap it up, I would say that the toolkit, the resources are available in the library, as I mentioned, and so you can always access them here. And if there are ever any problems accessing anything, or if you want further information, or you want an expert you want to get in touch with, you can always contact us here. The contact information is available on the toolkit page.
Thank you so much, Perkha. You were
Thank
bang
you.
on time. Thank you so much for
Perfect.
sticking to your time allocated. And thank you so much for giving us this really in-depth virtual tour of the resources that you have, or a small section of the resources you have on the UN Toolkit on synthetic drugs. Before we open the floor for questions, we're going to, I'm going to hand over to Henning, who's going to provide us with some information on that recent methamphetamine lab that they've encountered in South Africa. So Henning, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Yes, as stated, in South Africa on the 12th of February, we dismantled a methamphetamine lab, which was quite significant for several reasons. I've asked one of my colleagues, ZF Krein, to elaborate on that. I think he's the best person for that. I'm going to pass the floor to ZF, and I think his findings will be very interesting, because we have seen a trend in the shift of the type of precursors being used, and I think ZF will also elaborate on that and clarify certain things. Over to you, ZF. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Henning. So we've spent the last. Let me actually just share my screen. It's going to be a little bit of a rudimentary presentation, and I'm just going to skip between my presentation and the walkthrough. But let's just do that. Okay. All right. So, great. I think the discovery of a Clan lab is always proportional to the heat of the summer. We found this lab at the hottest day of our year, the African summer. But okay, so this is just about me, and just in case you have any other questions and you want to get hold of me or offer any insights, you can just take my email address at the bottom right there. I don't know if you can see if I'm sharing my screen.
We can see the
Great.
slides. Go ahead, please.
Perfect. Okay. So I'm just gonna. So we discovered it in just outside of our major city, Johannesburg, in a town called Krugersdorp. And if you can see here where it was, and just behind the meth lab, which is the largest meth lab for our country's history, just behind the just behind the lab, you actually see there's a school. So they were making meth in front of the school. Okay, so I think the best is just to give a walkthrough, and so I'm actually just going to show you some of the pictures and some videos of the lab. So this was as you're walking into the building. This is the first thing that we saw, and you can see how some reaction vessels. Essentially, this is just the primary thing that this reaction vessel does is it allows for an inlet of your chemicals and your materials and a stirrer, just a sort of a massive stirring machine. This wasn't under any pressure or temperature. Okay, that's just some aluminum oxide. Okay, and then when you leave that area. Okay, so over here you can see what could be a testing site, and for them to do small scale testing before they go into the industrial scale. Just to note that these photos and videos were taken after initial our forensics was there. So the majority of the product was already removed. So you won't see much product in these images. This is just to give you an idea of the scale of the chemicals that were there. And over here we'll come back to it maybe, but this is where the initial precursor chemicals, some of them still sealed, were being stored. And there you can see, okay, this is tartaric acid for what I believe to be right at the end of their synthetic process, but I'll come to it. And then aldehyde. Okay, I'll just so also in this area where in the previous video, in the same room, we found these buckets, and it was just I wasn't sure, it wasn't methamphetamine product. I wasn't quite certain initially what it was, but on later analysis, it's not confirmed. We're waiting for the results from our forensics, but the assumption is that's P2P. That's a P2P product there. So this is just a walkthrough, and for me now it's important that we just sample everything from every reaction vessel, from every container. In general, our forensics is only looking for product to say, okay, well, yeah, methamphetamine, yes, no. They're not generally looking to analyze everything in the reaction vessel or analyze solvents. So, but for us, for our understanding, that's become critically important. So we're constantly going back to this methamphetamine, to this lab to resample in case we've missed anything. And then, just for everyone seeing this, if there's anything any insight that any of you can offer us in something that we might miss, or something that is valuable in testing before because the destruction will happen soon. As you can see, it's right next to a school, so we are under pressure to destroy everything and clear this lab out. Here you can see just a separation. These are crude separation containers for aqueous and organic solutions. Okay, so coming back to the first video where you saw these reaction vessels. This in our assumptions now is just a reaction vessel for the P2P method, but the lab actually started with far more basic precursor chemicals. So with benzaldehyde and methyl 2-chloropropanoate, and I'll come to that at the end of this walkthrough. Here you can see again sort of a crude separation containers, just separating the organic and the aqueous mixture. The assumption is right that the product is sitting in the well, we in this case we're assuming they're separating now between well, there's two separations because they also did a final separation after the product to separate the 2 enantiomers of methamphetamine. But again, I'll just come to that later on. Here you can see just the layers. Yeah.
Sorry, ZF. I'll have to. Can we just wrap it up? We're just running out of time at the moment.
Okay, perfect.
Sorry
All
about
right,
that. Sorry, ZF.
Great, no problem. Okay, so you know what, I think I'll just go through the walkthrough and I won't get into any of the assumptions and theories and synthetic processes. And anyone who wants to discuss that could just contact me directly, or maybe on a later presentation. So, and then this is just the final sort of a drying room. Once you have your final product and it's dissolved in a solvent, it's just a drying room. The product's already been removed, but you can see the drying trays and some of the drying pots. Yeah, and that's, anyway, like I said, the initial precursor chemical, methyl 2-chloropropanoate. And anyway, that is right. And the last thing I guess I wanted to mention is back on the P2P, is that this lab seemed, once we, from the interviews with the workers there, the accused that we arrested, it seemed that they weren't only selling methamphetamine, but they were selling P2P as well. So they were synthesizing large quantities of P2P, which you can see here, and selling that as well, not just the final product. And just our last slide, you can see that the workers who were living there, I call them workers because I don't think they were I think they were exploited. They were migrant workers, and you can see it was a family. This was in the Clan lab, right next in one of the rooms next to where the synthesis was happening. So you can see a family was living there with the baby and small children. All right, and like I said, if there's any questions, you're welcome to contact me directly. Thank you.
Thank you, Zef, and for that as well. Yes, unfortunately, I think that is a good example of the unfortunate reality we are sitting in the world. This is the problem we are facing, and initiative like this global coalition is definitely a start for us as a world to work together. Our time is very, very limited. I'm going to open up the floor quickly for questions to any of our speakers. I apologize to other speakers as well. Unfortunately, we try to cram as much as possible in. So I'm going to open the floor for any of the speakers. Is there any questions?
I just had one question. Where were the migrant workers from?
Well, I think that Henning or myself could answer these questions because he spent